Hey everyone, today I'm excited because I have a non-dentist with me, a guy who thinks just like me, numbers driven, data driven. We share so many of the same practices that we work with. And so Jake Conway of Custom Practice Analytics is here today. Great guy. I've known him for a long time. And I think this is the perfect timing to bring him in and to share some of his expertise and what he's seen in the market right now because as everyone knows, you look at the stock market, it's up and down, there's turmoil, your patients are not accepting as much treatment, you have cancellations, there's a lot going on right now. And so this is a good time, I think, to dive into a little bit of the operational numbers and just to see what is it that the market's doing, but then how can we capitalize on the patients coming in the door, but then more importantly, how to get to that goal that you want to reach, which is, some of the practice we work with, they want to get out of the chair more. And they want to do more on a CEO side or do more with their family, things like that. Some of them want to grow, and so there's a lot of questions out there. And during a time where the economy is fluctuating, that might make it more difficult. So, Jake, thanks for coming on today. And I know you'll provide some great insight. How are you doing?
Great, man. I appreciate you having me on here, Ryan. We're looking forward to
Yeah.
this since we planned it a few weeks ago. So yeah, I'm super stoked. I think that you and I share, like you said, we share a brain in a lot of ways. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks again.
Yeah. So why don't you start and tell everyone that, because I know a lot of people that are going to listen to this work with you now, but why don't you just give a quick overview of the people who don't really know what you do so they can kind of see your background and expertise.
Yeah. Custom practice analytics, as you mentioned, that was formed back in 2012. Um, I am a partner and kind of the numbers guy with Mark Costas in the Dental Success Institute. Um, yeah, I've been doing that for going on 13 years. In a nutshell, it's all dental business analytics. I'm sure most have heard about Dental Intel and Practice by Numbers and Blue IQ and these things. And those are wonderful platforms. They focus mainly on the clinical side. With us, we focus on that stuff, but also overhead profitability trends, and really just the business analytics of the practice itself. We take those numbers, and in my opinion, the real magic is in the interpretation of this data to drive real actionable change. Um, so yes, we give you information, we give you reporting, but it's the interpretation of what the data is telling us, so that we can set plans, strategize, develop strategies around ways to improve the practice. Again, looking at it from a numbers perspective, which is what you guys do when it comes to marketing. So it's a similar approach, just on the business side of things.
Yeah, and I'll kind of give some insight of like how we use your reporting. So often, if I get a question like, okay, Ryan, I want to grow the practice, I want to get, say, 20 more new patients. And so what do we need to spend to get that? Well, one of the things is I'm like, well, what's Jake's report? What's your marketing spend right now? And I can quickly go to that and say, okay, it's 3.5%. And so we can look at that quickly. We can look at some of the overhead expenses. We can look at a lot of the detail I think that it takes to run a business, which is important. And so, you know, what like I'll be talking to a practice and they're like, hey, I think I need to add a hygienist. And they'll say, okay, Ryan, do I have enough demand for that? And so I can look at that and say, okay, here's where we're at with the demand. I think you do. And then I'll say, go back to Jake. What does Jake see with the numbers? Or they'll come to me and say, Jake says, I need to add on a hygienist. Are we ready to do, or where are we at if we do that from a marketing standpoint? So that's kind of, I think, a good relationship of what we do together, and what you do from a business. I mean, I look at you almost like you're a business analyst to me, of how healthy a business is. So with that, I think kind of an overview right now, I guess what I'd ask you, I'll start with you. What are questions that you're getting when because Jake jumps on calls kind of like I do, spend a lot of time on calls. And when I started doing this real quick, I asked Jake, I'm like, how do you do these many calls a day? and I think you mentioned like because your voice can get strained, you do hot tea or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
But Jake was one of the first people I went to ask, okay, I do a lot of calls a day. How do you do that? And so he gave me some good advice. But so Jake spends a lot of time talking to doctors and practice owners. So what are some of the questions you're getting right now?
Oh man. I think the common theme right now is you kind of alluded to it earlier with the market and, you know, the instability. I think dentists are kind of dental business owners. They're kind of wondering what to do with that information. Um, am I seeing similar trends in other practices? Because a lot of times I feel that dentistry can be an isolating feeling where it's happening to me, but that they're not quite sure if it's just them or if it's like a common thing that's happening. A lot of the commonalities that I'm seeing out there is like case acceptance starting to drop. Patients falling off the schedule. Um, Insurance is not reimbursing in a timely manner, or they're simply just dropping some of their reimbursement rates. Um, Obviously, the hiring and onboarding new team members is still a bit of a concern and a struggle. Some areas it's lifting, but a lot of parts of the country it's still a real struggle. So those are the commonalities I'm seeing. Some of it's new, some of it's just a continuation ever since ever since COVID, especially in the hygiene world, which we that's a touchy subject still. But that's a lot of things I'm seeing. Yeah. Production levels kind of being unstable, the accepted treatment acceptance rates of patients, the hygiene schedule falling off, and really it's just the overall sentiment of the direction of where dentistry is going. I also get questions on, is it time to sell to a DSO? Which that could be a whole different podcast.
Good.
But yeah, those are and the big one usually, and you alluded to this earlier, Ryan, which I'm sure you get a lot as well, which is man, I really want to gain more time away from the clinical side of the practice. And there is a way to do that, but they're kind of caught in this conundrum of I feel like the practice isn't quite stable over the past 6 months or so, but I still have that urge and I really want to escape the chair so I can start focusing on the practice, not in the practice as much, because I mean that's where a lot of the real magic happens. So that's kind of what I'm seeing out there right now, man.
Yeah, and so I think something that I do, and I get this question all the time, like, what are you seeing in the market? What are you seeing other practices do? That's literally the number one question that I see because people are just wondering what's happening. But I kind of go back and an advantage that you have, and I think this is what makes what you do pretty special, is that you work with some phenomenal practices. I mean, we're lucky enough to work with a lot of the black belt coaches and the black belt practices in DSI as well, but you work with, so many of them. What would you say is, and I got to preface this because a lot of people, they come to me and say, what's Addison doing? How can I do what Addison's doing? How can I do what Ben Cake is or, Jason Tenuri is doing, things like that. And I'm like, okay, you got to look at what they're doing and take pieces of what they're doing to be successful in your own business. And so in your case, you work with so many great practices and have helped so many great practices. What would you say are the things that, because right now we have a lot of practices that are killing it in Q1 of this year. What would you say sticks out, or some of the things that the practices that are very successful right now are doing, and what are you seeing them do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is kind of as I'm thinking through that, I think it's probably a three-pronged answer. I think number one is continuous awareness. Being intimate with the numbers of the practice. What is overhead doing? What are the trends? Um, uh, what is my cost per procedure as small example, but really being aware of just the overall health of your business, I should say, continuous on a month-to-month basis. Um, which you do a lot of that with your marketing. What's the in your world, it might be, what's the ROI on our marketing, strategies? What's the new conversion rate of our new patients? And we analyze why that's happening. In my world, it could be, overhead is on the rise. Well, why exactly is that happening? Could be that you're paying more in payroll, but also could be that your spending habits have increased. So again, just being continually aware of what's happening. Second, I think that this maybe get a little existential, maybe esoteric. I'll try to keep it tactical as possible, but I think that a lot of times business owners are so reactive, um, either when things are going really well, um, or when things are, not so well, and it's perceived either way. When things are going really well, we give ourselves passes. We don't stick to fundamentals as much. Maybe we stop doing certain things that got us to there in the first place. Conversely, when things are maybe a little unstable, as things are perceived right now in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months, we start to do things that might not be in character, or maybe we start reacting to things versus responding. Um,
Mhm.
Again, going back to awareness, if you're aware of that, you can maybe temper things either way. But I think that what I see a lot of these rock star dentists, these amazing dental business offices that you referred to earlier, that we do have a privilege of working with, I think that they have a tendency to go back to the fundamentals when things are really good or when things are not perceived as being rocky. Fall back to things that got you here. I think that dentistry as a whole went on such an amazing run for so long. COVID kind of rocked that. And we saw that practices fell away because they weren't prepared for something like that. Now, who could be? But I think that during that time, I saw a lot of these black belt offices lean on the fundamentals. So I think in times like this, it's not being so reactive to things, but more responding and falling back
Mhm.
to fundamentals that got you here. I think the third thing is, uh, again, from my perspective, I think it's knowing what levers to push and pull in times like this. So yes, falling back to your fundamentals, but with the awareness, you can be on the fly responsive to things and roll with the punches more easily if you have that awareness and have fundamentals to lean back on, and then you know what levers to push and pull in a response to whatever that is. Um, so again, I think it's kind of that things working harmoniously.
Yeah, that's good. And I think, I don't know if you intended this, but the way that you laid those out is it steps of order, that you need to know your numbers. You need to understand that business ebbs and flows and the market ebbs and flows. And so rather than to be so reactive, you need to be like, and I look as proactive of just knowing that, hey, I know there's going to be some instability. I know there's going to be maybe some more collections challenges coming up. So let's be proactive in ways to deal with that. And so, you went into a good order there, I think, that really lays it out. And I would agree 100% with all of those from the successful practices is they know their numbers. Like if I jump on a call and I can say, it's the middle of the month right now, and I can say, okay, where are you at from a new patient standpoint? And I know the practices that can tell me, okay, I've seen 32, I got 12 on the books, and this much in production on the books right off the bat. And then there's practices who have to look that up or can't find that. And I'm not criticizing those practices whatsoever, but the practices that know their numbers day to day, they're able to look at it and forecast. And I say dental and is it's like when you say that when you're out hiking or biking or something, when you're thirsty and overly thirsty, especially in a hot area, you're dehydrated. The same
Mhm.
thing with dental is by the time that you have seen something, you're like, oh, for the last 4 weeks now, my numbers are down. Well, that's bad. Like at that point, something's already occurring that you need to now go back and correct. Whereas if you're on top of those numbers early on and every day, you can make corrections quicker. And then also, I think it takes away some of that reactiveness where it's, you know, week to week where, well, I had a great week this week, but last week, but this week I'm down, 8 new patients. And I think you start to understand how your business works when you look at the numbers more in detail. A question that I would have then with this is so let's just say I'm having like right now, let's say February and March were a little bit lower than what I was expecting. And so then my collections are also lagging because maybe there's insurance reimbursements that are slow. I'm also seeing this, and I don't know if you are too, seeing patients not paying. So, practices like I was talking to Addison, and he collects, 99 point some percent, and he's down to like 93% because people just aren't paying. And so let's just say you're a practice who is maybe your numbers aren't where you want them to be, your collections are lower. What do you tell that practice? Do you have them look at their expenses? Do you look at trying to growth? Where do you start? Like if they know they're on that edge where they're like, oh man, this could get bad in a couple of months. Where do you bring them back to how to right the ship?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You know, this actually brings up a concept that I really try to teach the people that I work with, the dentists that I work with, and that's the whole concept of production and collection is the result of something. And so many times I feel that we focus on that as like the destination or that we hold on to that so tightly, we forget there's so much that happens before that. So there's a concept here where I start with, going back to this is a symptom of something. Um, and I call this a symptom cause solution approach. That's a symptom of something. We have to identify the causes and offer up solutions to, again, mitigate whatever's happening. And that's where being aware of your numbers and intimate with that really helps in times like that. Going back to this whole kind of flow of things, if we're focusing on production as the result, I start with the KPIs in the practice, perio percentages, collection percentages you brought up, case acceptances, again, so on and so forth. These KPIs are really a direct byproduct or the measuring stick of how well we're doing with the patient, our efficiencies in the practice. Um, the result of that, again, is the production and collection. So what I say is start with going back to those KPIs and what are the things that are under our control. And I think, a wise business owner in this sense would be able to discern what's under my control and what isn't. We can't make insurances pay quicker if it's simply something that they're doing. We can do everything in our power, send AOBs, resubmit claims, whatever we have to do. At the end of the day, there's only so much we can do, much like a patient. We can ping that patient, we can send out text, we can call, we can do everything I can, but at the end of the day, some of that's out of our control or a patient coming in. If patients don't show, no, like a no call, no show, that's out of our control.
Mhm.
But did we give ourselves the best opportunity through confirmation, so forth, backfilling it with a confirmed patient on the schedule? Do everything in our power to make sure that spot wasn't empty. Um, so again, I go back to what's under our control. If perio is low, why is that? If our collection percentage is low, why is that? So again, it's going back to some of these fundamentals and being aware is the discernment of control versus out of our control. And it's like, I love sports analogies like you did with the biking. Like, if you're in any sports, if you team sport, whatever, basketball, if you go out there and you give everything you can on that court or whatever it is, and you still lose the game, you can feel good about doing everything that you possibly could to give yourself the best opportunity to win the game. And that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah, I think that's the funny thing. I was going to bring up sports analogies too when you said that because I love them. I mean, it's an easy thing if you like sports to bring that up. Um, and so I think that's good advice of looking at what you can control and what you can't control and making decisions off of that because I think a lot of dentists get hung up on things that they can't control. And that's when you start to, I think, make your decision tree starts to skew a little bit because you start to get, okay, I can't control. So I'm gonna give an actual example here. I was talking to a practice who had they lost a hygienist. They have three associates, and they're like, I have a lot of doctor time open right now. They're booking out though almost 3 months for new patient hygiene. And I sat back and I said, okay, let's go through this process. What's the majority of your new patients? What percent of them come through hygiene, comp, and limited? And they're like, well, I get like 70% of my new patients through hygiene. And I'm like, okay, you're booking out three. months for those new patient hygiene, and you lost a hygienist. So let's do where's the issue here? And then, you can go back and say, well, I don't have enough new patients to feed the associate doctors. And so we went back to, okay, you can't control the fact that you can't get a hygienist tomorrow. It's just something you can't do. You can work on it, but you're not going to be able to fill that. You can't control if a hygienist leaves you for the most part. Maybe there's some things you can do, but for the most part, that's something you can't control. But what we can control right now is make a decision from a practice standpoint, from an operation stand wise. If someone calls in, see if you can get them onto the doctor's schedule, and then do your hygiene after. And from a marketing standpoint, let's go after people who are looking for emergencies just to get in and see your doctor. And that's it sounds very simple when you say it out loud like that, but I think a lot of practice owners, they get caught up into their associate telling them, hey, I need more patients, I need more production. And their hygienists are over here saying, I don't have any room to put my current patients. And they don't maybe see that as clearly. Do you see that kind of come up? That example, did that resonate?
Oh, absolutely. I think this comes down to being reactive, not responsive. We get so reactive to things and, oh my God, I lost a hygienist. What do I do? Mayday, mayday, versus responding in a way that's like, okay, I lost a hygienist. As you mentioned, that's out of my control. First of all, I may look back to say, what could I have done differently, potentially better to retain my team
Hmm.
members, just in general, from a cultural standpoint, whatever the case may be. But without beating yourself up about it, moving forward, how do I respond to this? Um, is there a way maybe I can ask my current dentist, hey, are you guys willing to maybe cut back on hours until we can gain? Because to me, that sounds like not only a new patient constriction, but also just exam counts in general. There's not enough to feed these dentists. Um, Again, how to respond to this, bringing new patients through doctors, certainly, creating time on hygiene schedule, but also again, talking with your current team members of maybe you have a dentist who's willing to scale back a day until you can kind of increase exam counts or whatever the case may be to lower your fixed cost. How can I lower my fixed cost associated with this little disruption in what I'm used to? Um, so I'd say again that whole reactive versus responsive, but I see that time and time again. Similar fashion to that. It also could be, I'm back in the chair more just because maybe I lost an associate, or maybe maybe the production of the office is starting to track down because I've taken my eye off the ball to some degree, and I'm back in the chair more. So again, it's being responsive, not reactive to things. So certainly, man, that's a common theme.
Yeah, and I think, talking to you, I see too that I don't look at it as much on this side, but you said, the cost. When you dig into something that I don't, I'm digging on the market, the demand side, what you can do operationally that I am able to advise on. But when you look at and or I will do one more example on like practices that maybe are going through a little bit of struggle right now, then I want to flip back to practices doing well. But when we look at the question of, you know, let's just go back to you can't get enough new patients in because you don't have enough hygiene time, and so you're restricted in maybe your new patient flow to an extent. What are some of the ways, but you want to ensure profitability is where it needs to be. What are some of the numbers or KPIs that you would look at and say, okay, maybe we can make some cuts here, or we can optimize. I'm always looking at optimizing the revenue, but you will look at sometimes optimizing the expenses.
Oh, absolutely. Um, Going back to some of the fundamentals, understanding what drives your profitability, whether good or bad. And that's your it's fixed cost and variable cost. I mean, very simply put, variable cost are expenses that ebb and flow with production and collection, things you have a lot more control over. Fixed expenses are things like payroll, again, things that will not change, rent, those sort of things that will not change regardless of what you produce and collect. So understanding that fundamentally helps you kind of navigate this. Um, to answer your question more specifically, I think when you're caught in this whole struggle that you mentioned, understanding what levers to push and pull that influence both of those fundamental pieces. Um, if your supplies are over budget for whatever reason, which even if they were in check at one point, a lot of times that if you take your eye off the ball, a lot of times the overspending creeps in. It's like personal spending habits. They have a way of ebb and flowing with our focus and attention. Lab expenses, marketing expenses, the things that you delve into. Are we spending more on CE? Again, things we have control over spending. Also, if we have a dip in production and collection, well, that's going to affect our fixed costs because those will remain the same, but our
Mhm.
collection is dropping. So again, that's going to affect profitability. But whatever is happening on those two fundamental pieces, that will spur our response. It could be a mixture of the two, meaning we have to control expenses and also increase our production, or it could be one of the two more heavily. Um, if it's simply our cost, our variable costs, we can dig into that and start establishing more of a regimented budget. If it's more so a fixed cost, let's find out why that's happening. Could be case acceptance dropping. Could be that hygiene is floundering and we don't have enough new patient spots. Perio blocks are being blown out. Um, and I will say, uh, if it's the if it's the fixed cost side of things, that's going to maybe start conversation of growth. But I have a little different view on it, what it would come when the growth, the concept of growth itself. Um, in my mind, the growth comes from three different forms in the dental practice. It's expansion of time, it's expansion of space and or clinical providers, or production per patient. Um, Growth, obviously, or expansion of time, that's easy to kind of conceptualize. It's maybe expand hours or days. Maybe you bring in a clinical provider, a second associate, third associate, whatever the case may be, add hygienist. Expansion of space, maybe it's time to add on a second, third, fourth, whatever operatory. Or if you're maxed out on both of those, maybe it's time to start focusing on dropping some insurances or renegotiating. They haven't done that in a while, or a mixture
Mhm.
of the two. All
Mhm.
things can be true at some point. Maybe you do a version of all of that, but understanding what to respond to. Um, KPIs that you mentioned, I guess more tactically speaking, if you're looking at the growth trend, if fixed cost is really what's driving your overhead, it's time to grow into that and a version of all those things we just mentioned. Um, Looking at your exam counts, are we doing more than 125, 135 recall exams, periodic exams per doctor per month? That's kind of that red line tipping point. If we're doing that amount of recalls, are we seeing more than 35 or 40 new patients per doctor? Um, Exams are limited exams, as many of those we can get in that's reasonable for the team, you know. But when you combine all exams in total, a lot of the tipping points that I see for most doctors, again, single doctors, 180, 185 total patient exams. If that's happening consistently per month, you could probably bet that you're at that burnout stage where case acceptance starts to drop because you're simply burnt out. If this is happening with multiple associates, I bet you can probably surmise that your junior doctors are being burnt out. They're watching things, they're not diagnosing comprehensively. So things start to drop. But again, this is being aware of these different components that these KPIs that drive our production and collection as a result. So I that was a long-winded answer.
No,
I hope that was good enough.
no, that was good because it talks where you dove. I mean, I talked very like a little bit about what you just said when it comes to number of exams for doctors, things like that, and that's incredibly important because I'm going to use an example here of phone data that will tell us something in the same way of what you're getting at, but a little bit different. So I had when a practice like they could be answering 85% of their calls. Then you put a little bit more into marketing, and this they say they're getting 500 calls a month, and they're answering 85% of those. That's not a bad number. It's pretty good in terms of answer rate. But they go to 650 calls, and their answer rate goes down to 72% or 70% because they get more calls, and their staff cannot then adapt to the and make work with that volume of calls. So what they've done in this case is they've increased their demand, they decrease their ability to convert that demand. And so they might yield, let's just say they're averaging 50 new patients a month, and they might get up to 55 or 54 new patients a month, but their demand could have gotten them to 70. But because they weren't able to see or answer enough calls based upon the call volume increasing, and this is, if you look at the same thing happens, like you were talking about, the number of exams per doctor, number of new patients per doctor, and patients per hygienist, you start to diminish your ability to capitalize on that. And that's an important, I think, data point to look at. Is a big issue. Like my time at Disney, they toss about unpeeling the onion. You got to unpeel the onion to start to see the layers and see what really is the issue here. And I think what you were talking about, exams per doctor and exams per hygienist, is a very important data point that is overlooked, because then you can directly look back at the production per patient. And I love you talk about production per patient. That is, I think, in my opinion, from my side, two major KPIs are total appointments per month and production per patient. Because I've seen this happen more than I can count. Is I've seen new patient number going up, total appointments going down.
Yep.
And they're sitting there like, oh, great, I'm getting more new patients. And I'm like, but your total appointments are down.
Yep.
And then I'm like, that's going to catch up to you quickly.
Yep.
And
Kind of
and
the depth cross, right? Like
yes,
exam
uh-huh.
counts go up and production starts to, yep,
Correct. Uh-huh. And so I think that's where, going back to some of the insight you bring to, these practices, is that ability to examine the right data to make the right decision. And really to dive um, into those numbers and figure out, okay, what really, if it's not always a problem, it's like looking at how can we optimize and how can we grow even further. So let's flip to, I guess, a successful practice. Let's just say you take one of your top practices you work with. What's Because the conversation is so different when you're talking from like a one practice doctor who's maintaining, they want 3% growth every year, or versus the one practice doctor who wants to have three doctors, or one doctor practice who wants to have three doctors someday. There's so many different conversations going on here between these dentists, and I think that's another important thing too. Is like everybody's different, so you got to make sure you're comparing yourselves to practices who are like you or who you want to be like. But if you look at the practices that are successful and growing, what are some of the things that you would talk to them about? That it's not like, I guess, a challenge that your problem you're trying to fix as much, but you're trying to, like, what are they optimizing?
I see. Um, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the previous concept just for a second because I think it
Yeah,
might be important for some.
yeah.
I think that um, I think in the world of dentistry, a lot of times we think more is more. At least the dentists think more is more. More phone calls,
Hmm.
more new patients, more exams, more, more, more. And reality is, at some point, and you alluded to this, and I think from your side of things, I think you experienced this, like you said, more times than you can count. There's a point where volume trumps all efficiency, and I see a lot of times dentists experience that. And so to be aware of these tipping points, I think is incredibly crucial. And these tipping points can vary from doctor to doctor. Exam counts, I gave that as an example or like a threshold, but it's almost like a fingerprint. It's going to be a little different for different doctors
Hmm.
depending on how many columns of hygiene they can run, clinical skill sets, blah, blah, blah. So being aware of that, I think, is incredibly important as you're analyzing that from that perspective. So I just kind of wanted to put a bow on that. So thank you for allowing the time for that.
Yeah, well, and I guess that does segue, because I'm gonna give an example of a one doctor practice who who I work with, um, who hasn't grown their new patient count and their total active patient count over the last 3 years by much, but they're growing every year by 15 to 20% in revenue, because they're doing everything, and without saying their name, and you assisted this practice as well, because I would have multiple conversations with them about things. You help them drop insurances to make decisions on that. You help them work on getting the expenses down, profit up, but then also optimizing their schedule and optimizing the practice, the hygienist schedule, and everything to increase production without really seeing their amount of this is what's interesting. Their active patient, new patient number, I said, are pretty much not flat, but barely growing. But their total appointment count jumped up, and their production per appointment went up. And so I think that's an example, I guess, kind of answer the question I was going to ask you is like that's something this practice was successful, and they're one doctor, they're making more money without working more hours.
Totally. Production per patient, as we mentioned, then the quality of
Hmm.
patient, which I know that's something you focus on almost like super intensely. But yeah, I mean that's an example of doing more with the same or less even. I'm with you. I've seen so many offices where new patients are pinging out at 70, 80 for a single doctor. We normalize some things and things, it settles down to 45 to 50, but all of a sudden they're producing more and more and more because they're doing more with less. And that's a hard concept for, a lot of dentists to kind of wrap their mind around. Because they want to prepare for the associate and they want to prepare for this, but remind ourselves that it could be a volume play. I'm not negating that, but a lot of times it's being able to look at this objectively and see what are the true opportunities. And one of the indications of what you're describing, Ryan, is hygiene might be booked forever, but if the doctor schedule isn't full and our production per patient is dropping and treatment acceptance and so forth, there's something happening in that hygiene to doctor, closing restorative working of things and that whole exchange. So simplistic view, but again, I see that happen often. So I hope that kind of piggybacked on what you see.
Yeah, and I think, through this conversation too, I realized, and I've known this, but I realize it a little bit more now is, you know, you you and I are both data focused people, but one thing is what we talk about, and we talked about this before we started the call here, was we also talk about what they want in their life. What are their goals? And so, it's more of a personal side of things. I think you do a good job of that, of evaluating. You're going to look at practice numbers all day, but you're also going to talk to that owner and that dentist about what do they want? Like, do they want to grow? Do they want to step out of the chair? Do they want another location? What is it that they want? I think you do a good job of bringing in some personal perspectives to help grow their business as well. Can you touch a little bit on like when you're talking to a practice owner, I mean, how much do you get into that about
Oh,
their personal goals?
absolutely. And I appreciate you asking that because, with what I do, the numbers are just the kind of the tip of the iceberg, similar to what you do. The real meat of it is all below the surface, the way I see it. And a lot of that is tying the business side of things, the super tactical numbers, but tying that into more of the human element. Because at the end of the day, it's all human. It's you and your leadership. It's your team members. I mean, none of this would be possible without your team, your patients, your associates, and you as the leader. That's just the fact of what you're. That's the predicament that we're all in as business owners. With that said, that's where I start. Not only is it what's your vision and where you want to go, but it's kind of harsh reality of are you willing and do you know what it's going to take to get there? Um, and if you're not willing to do that, that's okay. But I think we have to understand that so we can either temper expectations, readjust, or simply just be content with whatever that looks like because we know the goal, our goal, but we also know what we're willing and not willing to do to achieve that, kind of establishing our non-negotiables. For instance, if if you want to get to 3 or 4 different practices and be a multiple practice, enterprise, group practices, understanding or knowing and being willing to know that it's going to consume a lot of my time. It's going to be a financial struggle at times. I'm going to have to be in the chair a ton for a lot of the time. Just knowing that it's going to take that for however long it takes. And if you're not willing to do that, you may not be either ready or you may not truly be compelled to be in multiple office conglomeration. In fact, a lot of times I find on these conversations, it's I want more time and I want more money. We just think because we've seen others do it. We think that 3 or 4 offices are going to give us that flexibility, time, and money, when
Yeah.
reality is it might be with the current practice that you're owning, and it might just be expanding there, or it might be bringing on whatever that looks like, but readjusting exactly what you're after. Again, if it's more time, more money, it's not just one path. There could be an infinite amount of paths. So again, kind of understanding that as well.
Yeah, and I had a doctor that spoke with you. We were going through, and his his goal was, he was like, I need to, build up this big practice, and I need to start getting, I want to get more production to me. And, by he had two associates, and he was going through, and so we were building that up. We're like, let's build some marketing to try to get him more production. And then he had a call with me after talking with you, and he was like, I kind of had a realization that I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to do bread and butter dentistry, and I want to have my associates do the big cases, because bread and butter, and this is why he wanted bread and butter dentistry. I've done it. He was older. He's like, I've gone through and done all that in my career. This is a lot stressful for me. I go into the office, I get to connect with the patient. I don't have to worry about the things that come along with these bigger services, bigger treatments. And my stress is down. I'm getting production to my associates, which then I'm making money off of that. And I'm not working harder. I'm getting to do what I want to do. And I'm still able to see the patients that have been seeing me for years. And it was like a night and day switch. And he was like, okay, so you just feed me as much bread and butter every day as you can, because I'm going to take that. And he was saying his wife is happy with it, and I'll follow up with him on it. Things were, his life had transformed to an extent because he's less stressed. But he literally, and he told me he looked up the numbers with you and went through and said, this makes sense for my business to be able to make this transition. And so I think that goes back to what you're talking about, is sometimes you have to get to the root of what somebody wants, or where they want to be, where they want to go. And often I think we sometimes will maybe take a route that we think is going to get us there, but in reality, there's multiple paths to choose. And I think that's where, you can come in and help. We try to do that from a marketing standpoint. So I think I know I appreciate the fact that there's somebody else from a number standpoint that also looks at the personal side of things.
Yeah, the human element.
Yeah.
I love doing that. And what's funny is I know exactly who you're talking about. And that was a really, yeah, that was a really fun, I'd say fun and rewarding case study because yeah, as data guys, it sometimes it's so hard and fast, numbers, 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 and it's nice to get
Yeah.
the human side of things, you know what I mean? So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah. And I think, we're kind of running towards the end of our time here. So I would say, is there anything, first of all, if you want to, I'll send out a link for Jake's information. If you want to connect with Jake, great. Just at least set up a call with him to see if he can help the practice at all. I know you have some different tier services that you offer, that, for the value of what you do, it's incredible. And so I would definitely recommend at least taking a look at what Jake does if you're not working with them. But if you want to sum up, I guess, you know, from this conversation, or any other thoughts that you have, especially like right now during this time, where we're at, I guess, with practices in terms of, economy, patients, everything going on out there. Is any other thoughts that you have?
Yeah, dude, I think that I like to keep things simple as much as I can anyway, because that helps me and my monkey brain. Um, I'd say especially times like this, create as much awareness as you possibly can in all aspects of your business and maybe personal life too. Um, how can I be more responsive and not reactive to things, and discerning what's under my control and what isn't? And I think that it's a little esoteric maybe, but there's a tendency we have these negative or scarcity thoughts that come into our brain. I think to understand that when there's a negative thought, understand that 100% of the time it's actually never true. Um, so when things are maybe rocky, understand that these thoughts are true. Uh, you may not know what's actually true, but know that that thought isn't, and then you can move about your day and not be so reactive to things. Um, so I'd say again, the awareness is always a good piece, but I'd say kind of following some of that has helped me certainly in uncertain times, which is the scariest place to be as a human. So I'd say that's
Yeah.
my final thought.
And I like it. And we'll do one more sports analogy. The Masters just completed, and one of the greatest. I mean, you could not have asked if you're a golf fan for an ending to a
Oh,
tournament like that.
that was so sweet.
So sweet. But there's so many layers to that, and I think it makes sense in business. You have Justin Rose sitting there. He did what he needed to do. He because the outcome was out of his control. He finished his round, set himself in position to have a chance. And then you have on the flip side a guy in Rory who had a chance to win it but missed it. And now they're back, and Roy had to recover from the mistake that he made on the 18th hole, in regulation play there. And having them go back and Roy one ups Justin, I mean, yeah, Justin Rose there, and but they both, you can almost see they were both doing what they needed to do, and they weren't really focused, I think, on each other. But I think one of the great moments of that is Justin Rose in an interview. You know, for him financially, that was a significant loss,
Totally.
but the way he approached that loss was of moving forward and really recognizing, I think, like the moment. It just, to me, there was a lot of emotions there because it's like you focus on what you can control. Stick to what you know what you can do. Don't really worry about everyone else around you. And if there are times of turmoil or up and down, just don't be as reactive and do your best to just keep moving forward and don't let the down times bother you because Rory McIlroy could have literally, I mean, in back of his head, how many putts has he missed to blow tournaments, and he
Totally.
didn't do it. And I think it takes that in a business, it takes that resilience. It takes looking at the numbers, knowing the numbers, surrounding yourself with people who can help encourage you and get you to the point where you can deal with adversity and you can overcome adversity and do some amazing things. And so, I'm so glad that you and I work with a lot of the same people, and we both have the opportunity to get practices to where they need to be, and be a part of their success. And so I'm glad to have you as an ally in helping the dental industry and these practices that we work with.
Same sentiment, dude. I every chance I get, every chance I get, I take the opportunity to say, hey, Ryan Gross should be your guy. So I appreciate the sentiment. I share the exact same thing, man.
Cool. Well, thank you again. I'm going to give your information out. Feel free to contact Jake. Great guy. If you haven't worked with him, at least give him a call and see his approach to things. And I appreciate your time, Jake.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's been fun as always.
No problem.